You ever notice how life doesn't knock? No polite little tap on the door, no excuse me, mind if I turn your whole world upside down? Nah, it just barges in, flips the furniture, burns the drapes, and laughs while you crawl through the ashes trying to salvage whatever. And just when you think you're finally used to the mess, just when the chaos starts to feel like home, boom, something shifts, quietly, like a whisper behind the noise. Like someone upstairs packed your bags while you weren't looking and left the front door wide open. It's funny how we get, it's funny how we do. You sit in the same spot, breathe the same toxic air, tell yourself this is fine, while everything inside you screams otherwise. You decorate the cell, you paint the walls with hope. You convince yourself the flickering light above your head is enough sunshine to survive on. And why? Because you've been in the dark so long you've started squinting at peace like it's the real threat. You call the lock a blessing because it's familiar. You call the pain growth because it's predictable. That's the joke. People build their whole identity around survival, around struggle, around suffering. You wear your wounds like a resume. You brag about how much you can take, how little you need, how strong you are for staying in the fire like a good little soldier. But at some point, it stops being strength and starts being self-sabotage. You start mistaking endurance for purpose. Just because you can survive somewhere doesn't mean you were meant to stay there. But we do. Oh, how we do. We stay in places that are killing us slowly because they feel more real than the promise of something better. We fear the unknown more than we hate the pain. Because at least pain is predictable. At least chaos has a rhythm. You don't leave because it hurts. You don't leave because it's broken. You stay because it's yours. You planted roots in the rubble and convinced yourself that's called stability. You built a routine around your own emotional bruises and called it discipline. You told yourself that maybe this was your role in the story, to be the one who endures, the one who adores, the one who carries, the one who bends and bends and bends. But when you're so used to bending, standing upright feels unnatural. When you're used to chains, freedom feels like falling. Then one day it starts, a thought, a nudge, a whisper you can't quite explain. Something doesn't feel right anymore. The walls that used to feel safe start to close in. The people you swore would never leave you suddenly feel like strangers. The habits that once helped you cope now feel like poison. That's the shift, that's the moment the illusion starts to crack. But instead of leaving, you panic. You patch it up. You gaslight yourself into staying. You say it's not that bad. Maybe I'm just being dramatic. Maybe I just need to try harder. You slap duct tape over your instincts and call it loyalty. But the truth, deep down, you know the difference between discomfort that grows you and discomfort that buries you. You know the difference between a challenge and a cage. But it's easier to pretend you don't. Because if you admit it's time to leave, that means you've wasted time staying. That means all those sacrifices, all that pain, all those sleepless nights, they weren't stepping stones, they were anchors. And who wants to admit they've been drowning in a place they called home? But there's a cost to comfort, a quiet one, a creeping one. It doesn't show up with alarms, it shows up with numbness. With the slow fading of joy, with the shrinking of your voice, with dreams that stop knocking, because you've stopped answering. You start becoming a ghost in your own life, haunting the same routines, wearing the same fake smiles, speaking only when spoken to by fear. And all the while, the door's been open. But stepping through would mean admitting you overstayed. And that kind of truth, it's heavier than the pain you're used to carrying. So you keep polishing the cage, keep rearranging the bars, keep telling yourself that maybe if you just fix this one thing, or change that one part of yourself, it'll get better. That they'll see you, that it'll finally feel like home again. But it won't, because it never was. It was a waiting room, a tunnel, a transition dressed up like a destination. And now the time's come, you feel it. In your bones, in your breath, that strange sharp ache that tells you this place can't hold you anymore. And still you hesitate, Because walking into the unknown feels like madness. Because letting go feels like betrayal. Because if you leave, who will you be? What will you have? But maybe that's the point. Maybe you were never meant to bring the old version of you into the new space. Maybe the cage wasn't just keeping you in, it was keeping the new you out. It's not always thunder and lightning, you know. No fireworks. No grand announcements. When things shift, when something bigger starts moving, it rarely makes a scene. It's subtle, creepy even. Like waking up and realizing the pictures on your wall aren't where you left them. Like walking into a room you've known your whole life and something feels off. You can't explain it, but it's there. The silence is different. The air tastes unfamiliar. That's how you know something's changed. And that's the thing most people miss. They're too busy looking for big signs, giant arrows pointing the way, some booming voice from the sky spelling it all out. But real shifts, they slip in quietly like a thief that leaves gifts. Instead of stealing, you start to notice things don't hit the same. The places that once felt warm now feel cold. The people you used to run to don't call like they used to. The things that used to matter, suddenly meaningless. And you're left wondering if you've gone numb or if the world's just fading. But what if it's neither? What if something inside you just woke up before everything else caught on? What if the universe already updated the script but forgot to notify the actors? That's the trick, isn't it? You feel the change long before you see it. You're not crazy. You're not overthinking. You're sensing. You're picking up on the cues that everyone else's noise drowns out. Because when your soul's ready for something new, it stops dancing to the old tune. It gets quiet, restless, impatient. It knows long before you do. It knows that job that used to fulfill you starts to feel like a straitjacket. That relationship that once made you feel seen now makes you feel invisible. That routine you called stability, now it just feels like a loop with no exit. The game changed, and you're still trying to win with outdated rules, but here's the real punchline: you'll try to force it. Of course you will. You'll try to make it feel right again. You'll twist yourself into knots. Blame yourself, question everything. Why don't I care like I used to? Why can't I be happy with what I have? What's wrong with me? You'll dig your heels in and pray for the old fire to come back. But it won't, because it's not supposed to. That fire died to make room for a bigger one. But we mourn the embers instead of feeding the new flame. That's the joke. We cry over doors that won't open when we're already holding the key to the next one. So what do we do instead? We distract ourselves. We throw ourselves into meaningless busy work. We surround ourselves with people who tell us what we want to hear. We keep going through the motions, pretending the pieces still fit. All while something inside us is screaming, clawing at the walls, trying to break free. Because your spirit can't thrive in a space it's already outgrown. It's like trying to stretch your legs in a coffin and wondering why it's hard to breathe. Maybe the reason you're uncomfortable is because you were never meant to stay there in the first place, and then come the tests. The strange little glitches in the matrix. People start falling off. Opportunities dry up. You get rejected for things you didn't even want. Plans you swore were solid start crumbling. Not because you failed, but because something better is being carved out behind the scenes. But we see endings and assume punishment. We see detours and call them delays. We think losing is a sign we messed up, when maybe it's a sign we were aiming too low to begin with. What if the thing falling apart is actually falling into place and we're just too focused on the debris to see the design? Most won't get it. Most will try to fix what's fading. Glue the cracks. Patch the holes. But you're not most. You feel it in your chest, in your gut. In those moments when everything is still and the world hasn't caught up to your truth yet. You know there's something on the other side of this emptiness. Something loud hiding in the quiet. Something real sitting just outside your line of sight, waiting for you to stop pretending the old makes sense. You don't need permission. You don't need proof. You just need to stop lying to yourself about what still fits. You need to stop clinging to places you've already left emotionally. You need to stop asking for confirmation from people who can't hear what you hear. Because when the season changes, it doesn't care if you're ready. It just shifts. And if you're too scared to follow, you'll rot in a place that used to feel like home. You ever wonder why peace feels suspicious? Like the moment something good happens, your first instinct isn't joy, it's paranoia. What's the catch? Who's gonna ruin it? How long before this blows up in my face? That's the reflex. That's the program. You're not conditioned for rest, you're wired for war. So when silence comes, you assume it's the calm before the next explosion. You don't trust stillness, you brace against it. And when something feels too good to be true, you convince yourself it probably is. That's the curse of surviving too long in places that hurt you. The moment peace walks in, you interrogate it like it's a suspect. See, no one talks about the guilt that comes with healing. How awkward it feels to smile when your muscles are still used to flinching. How weird it is to laugh when your lungs have only known screaming. You've been trained to expect chaos, so peace doesn't feel like home, it feels like it's like. You keep checking over your shoulder, waiting for the hammer to drop. Not because it has to, but because it always did. That's the pattern. And when something always happens, your mind starts building its home there. Even if it's hell, at least it's familiar. But here's the twisted part. You start feeling wrong for wanting more, for craving peace. You tell yourself you should just be grateful. After all, you made it this far. You're not bleeding anymore. You're not drowning anymore. Isn't that enough? Why want more? Why reach further? Why ask for space when you already got the floor? You feel selfish, ungrateful, like you're betraying everything you survived by daring to dream. Beyond it, like peace is a luxury, not a right. Like wholeness is only for other people. You see others dancing in the light, and instead of joining, you shrink. You tell yourself, that's not for me. I'm not built for that. You joke about your trauma like it's a personality trait. You wear your wounds like conversation starters, because if you laugh at the pain first, no one can use it against you. You armor yourself in bitterness and call it realism, but deep down you're scared. Scared that if you put the sword down, you won't know who you are without it. That if you stop fighting, there'll be nothing left. So you keep swinging at ghosts, even when there's no one left in the ring but you and just when you start to settle, life dares you to dream. It whispers things you're not ready to hear. Things like safety, joy, belonging. And you laugh. You roll your eyes. You tell that voice to get real. Because it's easier to mock what you want than admit how badly you want it. You sabotage the good before it can reject you. You pull away before they can walk away. You break it before it breaks you. That way, at least you're in control. At least it's your choice. But the truth is, you've confused pain with protection. You've mistaken exhaustion for strength. And now, peace feels like weakness. You don't even realize how far you've come, how much you've grown. Because you're still using old metrics to measure new ground. You still think strength is about how much you can carry, not how easily you can let go. You still think love has to hurt to be real. You still think calm means boring. But maybe peace is just quiet because it doesn't need to prove anything. Maybe love doesn't shout because it's not insecure. Maybe joy doesn't need an audience to exist. And yet you hesitate. You peek at the door but never open it. You say you want out, but you keep rearranging the furniture in the same haunted room. You tell yourself you're healing, but all you've done is stop the bleeding. You haven't started breathing. There's a difference. There's a gap between surviving and living, between silence and peace, between numb and healed. But you're scared to cross it. Because what if you get there and it's worse? What if you get there and it's real? What if you don't know how to live without chaos gnawing at your heels? You want peace, but you don't trust it. You want rest, but you don't know what to do with it. You want love, but you keep choosing people who mirror your wounds instead of your worth. Not because you're broken, but because broken feels familiar. It's the devil you know. And until you unlearn the comfort of pain, you'll keep running from the very things that were meant to set you free. Funny how people beg for blessings and then scream when the storm hits. Everyone wants a miracle, but nobody wants the mess that drags in first. See, there's this twisted little thing most folks miss before something beautiful shows up. Everything ugly has to get exposed. Before the new is allowed in, the old has to be ripped out by the roots. And that part. Oh, no one claps for that part. That's not the highlight reel, that's the scene people skip. The unraveling, the confusion, the heartbreak. But that's the prelude. That's the clearing out before the foundation gets laid. People think silence means abandonment. They think closed doors mean punishment. They see endings and they cry like the sky's falling, not realizing something bigger is being constructed out of sight. But that's how the divine works, isn't it? Sneaky. Not flashy. Not loud. No big announcements or press releases. Just removal. Sudden, brutal, surgical. That person you leaned on suddenly disappears. That plan you clung to shatters. That job, that home, that routine, it collapses. And all you're left with is dust and questions and this annoying, aching feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything is falling apart on purpose. That's where people lose it. That's where they panic. Because nobody teaches you how to sit in the in-between. The hallway between the door that's slammed shut and the one that hasn't opened yet. That space, that's where the doubt lies. That's where the fear starts whispering, you're cursed, you're forgotten, you're finished. And because it's quiet, you believe it. Because there's no applause, you assume you're failing. But maybe the silence isn't empty. Maybe it's sacred. Maybe it's the sound of construction behind a curtain you're not allowed to peep behind. You beg for purpose, and then cry when comfort gets snatched. You ask for change and then collapse when things get disrupted. But what did you expect? That a better life would show up politely, not gently, and wait for you to be ready. No, it kicks the door in. It flips the table. It burns the blueprint. It forces you to move. Because left to your own devices, you'd stay in that dead relationship. You'd rot in that job that drains you. You'd fake a smile in that life that's slowly suffocating you. So something bigger steps in, wrecks the illusion, and calls it mercy. And don't kid yourself, removal isn't rejection. It's protection in disguise. It's not that you were denied something good. It's that you were being cleared for something sacred. That person didn't leave because you're unlovable. They left because they couldn't go where you're going. That opportunity didn't vanish because you're a failure. It vanished because it would have chained you down. But pain has a funny way of distorting the truth. Makes you forget that pruning always comes before blooming. Makes you forget that death always shows up before resurrection. You want to skip the fire, but still wear the crown. You want the reward without the refinement. But that's not how this works. You don't get diamonds without crushing. You don't get wisdom without wounds. You don't get the promise without the pruning. And that pruning, it doesn't feel holy. It feels like betrayal. It feels like abandonment. It feels like everything you thought was permanent suddenly pulling away without warning. But maybe the collapse is the point. Maybe the fall is the setup. Maybe you're not being buried, you're being planted, and still you'll fight it. Of course you will. You'll claw at the old. You'll tape back together what was meant to break. You'll blame yourself. You'll beg for what left you. But eventually the pain of holding on will outweigh the fear of letting go. Eventually you'll realize the door didn't lock behind you. It was holding something dangerous on the other side. Eventually you'll stop crying for what's gone and start preparing for what's coming. And here's the thing, no one around you will understand it. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed. They'll think you're ungrateful, but they weren't there when everything inside you started shifting. They didn't feel the pressure before the break. They didn't hear the whisper before the storm. So don't expect applause for your awakening. Don't wait for approval to move forward. Most people are too scared to leave the burning building. Even when the smoke fills their lungs, you were never meant to fit into what next to you. You were never meant to beg for crumbs at tables you were called to flip. When the divine starts removing, It's not because you're being punished, it's for you. Because you're being prepared. But you can't take dead weight into a living future. You can't carry betrayal into a blessing. You can't walk through new doors with old baggage dragging behind you like chains made of memories and guilt and good intentions gone or rotten. You ever notice how people love the idea of them? Oh, they clap when you talk about change, growth, moving forward. They throw around words like faith and blessings like confetti. But the second the ground starts to crack under their feet, the second things get unstable, unpredictable, they panic. Because no one told them that transformation feels a lot like destruction at first. No one warned them that walking into a new chapter means everything familiar has to collapse. And it does. Quietly. Violently, without permission. You want a new life, but you want it to look like the old one, just shinier. You want a new home, but you want the same floor plan, the same neighbors, the same view. You want peace, but you want to bring your chaos with you. That's the problem. People want the future but refuse to bury the past. They want healing, but they keep picking at the same scab and wondering why it still bleeds. They drag old habits, old pain, old people into the new place and call it growth. But you can't bring poison into paradise and expect the flowers to bloom. When something new is prepared for you, when it's real, when it's divine, it doesn't make room for your delusions. It doesn't negotiate with your comfort. It doesn't entertain your fantasy that you can have. Resurrection without death. It clears the space. Brutally. Thoroughly. It evicts every lie you made your identity. It exposes every crack you painted over with "I'm fine." It dares you to drop the mask, the one you've been wearing so long it started to feel like your face. And if you hesitate, if you fight it, the process only gets louder. So what does that look like? It looks like being surrounded by people and feeling completely alone. It looks like getting everything you thought you wanted and realizing it doesn't fill you. It looks like waking up in a house that used to feel safe and suddenly realizing it's suffocating you. The curtains are still the same. The pictures on the wall haven't moved. But something in the atmosphere shifted. And that shift, that's the whisper of something new pulling you forward while everything old starts to rot in your hands. You try to ignore it. You tell yourself, I should be grateful. I should be content. But your soul's not buying it. It knows, it always knows, and so it starts rebelling. Restless. Unsettled. You stop laughing at the jokes you used to love. You stop answering calls you used to crave. You start ghosting versions of yourself that used to feel like home. Because deep down, something in you realizes you're not supposed to be here anymore. You were meant to move, to leave, to level up, but fear keeps you orbiting ruins and calling it home. And let's talk about that fear. It's not just about the unknown, is it? It's about who you'll be without the wounds, without the victim story, without the excuses. You're scared of who you might become if you actually believed you were worthy of something better. If you actually stepped into the space that was made for you. Because then what? No more hiding. No more blame. No more pretending you didn't hear the call. That's terrifying. That's real. That's why most people stay. Not because they love the pain, but because it's predictable. But here's the thing, you're outgrowing your own lies. The stories that used to soothe you are starting to itch. The excuses that used to buy you time are now costing you peace. You can't lie to yourself without consequences anymore. Your body knows. That headache isn't just a headache. That tightness in your chest isn't random. That dream you keep having where everything's shifting. It's not just fantasy. It's a memo from the future trying to break through your denial. You don't need a sign, you already saw it. You don't need confirmation, you already feel it. What you need is nerve. What you need is surrender. You think you're waiting for the right time, the perfect moment, the neon sign that says go now. But time's not the issue. Timing's not the problem. It's your grip. It's your addiction to familiar pain. Your obsession with predictability. You're standing on the edge of a new beginning, and instead of stepping forward, you keep looking back, romanticizing the wreckage, pretending the ashes were art. That's what people do when they're scared to rebuild. They worship what destroyed them, but the new space, it's ready, it's been ready. It's not waiting for your perfection. It's waiting for your decision. And that decision, it won't come easy. It won't be clean. You'll grieve things you thought you were done grieving. You'll feel homesick for a place you prayed to escape. You'll question everything you thought you knew. But that's the price, that's the cost of stepping into something real. You don't get to take your ghosts with you. You don't get to bring your comfort zone into the promised land. You leave that behind or it drags you back.